All right, I went into probably far greater detail than I need to about sealant, but sealant, Lycoming.
Are there cases where you don't use a sealant?
Not on Lycoming and Continentals. So Lycoming, according to service instruction 1125 Delta, which you should be using when you put your engine together, you're going to use double aught, that's 00, silk thread, and POB, plyo bond, number 4. Not number 3, not number 5, number 4. According to Lycoming School, they said silk thread will eventually wear out, leaving only the POB. What do you think about that? Because I have my thoughts.
Where does it go? Is it burning up and turning into ash?
There's only two ways, I guess, you can get rid of it. Heat it up till it burn up, or fretting. So, to this instructor's credit, he's right. If an engine was built by Lycoming, it will have fretting and loss of silk thread eventually. I've taken apart many engines that were never touched by anybody but Lycoming. And is that a Hawaiian bun? They're delicious. You got some extras? Do you have any butter and a little honey? All right, so yeah. So I would take apart these Lycoming engines that hadn't been put together. Nobody's touched them except for Lycoming, and they did. They had fretting, and the plyo bond or the silk thread was gone. And then I've taken apart other engines. I don't know if I've taken many of mine apart. It was crashed. No. But I've taken engines apart that weren't Lycoming, that had been built in the field, that were put together correctly with thousands of hours, and I pulled it apart, and you couldn't peel it off anymore, but it was there as plain as day. It was just, you try and pick it, it would just break in pieces as you pulled it, but it was there and it was working. So I don't buy that. Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah.
In like the aviation world, are there certain shops that are sort of like within the automotive where it's like Chevy, you go to a Chevy dealership and you take your car to it, and they're like, when you go to sell your car, like my car was only touched by Chevy, like Chevy mechanics.
Sure, yeah.
Are they like is like the equivalent, or is it just kind of like shops everywhere that?
We could probably have Duke come up here and give us a little dissertation about taking it to a dealer. You work for a dealer, right?
Did.
Don't. It's like, don't mention my name. Didn't you work for a dealer in automotive?
Oh, not Mazer. You're talking about core.
Yeah, cars.
Yeah,
in cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I have my opinion. Yes, I know I'm one of those guys who I like to take my car to the factory, but are the factory workers always the best?
That depends what you get.
It just depends. So it's a hit and miss. You take it to the dealership, you got 12 guys. 6 of them are freaking geniuses. The only guys and the other 6 are
Brand new.
they don't know what they're doing and they're hacks, So it's just like that in aircraft world. Everywhere you go, you've got fantastic mechanics and you've got.
Liquid lube guys. So.
Take a look at the class. Are we all the same?
You're only safe if you have a letter that says Kingdom's gonna bring it.
If you look around the class and you don't see the class idiot, chances are you're the.
Why'd you look at me when you said that?
I look eyes level.
Make eye contact with me.
If you feel that I made eye contact with you when I did it.
I'm silly.
He didn't say.
All right. Continental. We're going to use the M-0 manual, Section 3. Section 3, I haven't been really exposed to that yet. Uses, now I'm getting rid 654663 gasket sealant on the 246 side, or the 24. which is also, let me see, Permatex 80017 if you care. Aviation forma gasket number 3 on one side, and the other side is a part number 656942 gasket maker. Not to exceed 0.010 inch on the 13135 side. So you're using two completely different products, one side versus the other. How they came up with that, I would love to know. That stuff right there is the same thing as Loctite
Not Permatex. What color?
515 brown.
Oh, it's the brown. Okay.
And the 2-4 side, this gets the silk thread. Silk thread. Part number 641543. Not the same as Lycoming, right?
They're two different brands.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why you're tripping. I was like, it's probably some like chemical reaction.
It's two different brands, two different products, but they want it there. They want this on the oil pumps. It's a weird thing. So, like I said, it's what you don't know that gets you. I mean, now you know this, but what is the big takeaway from this? I mean, I've never asked you on a test, which side of a Continental takes that's just not who I would ever want to be.
Kind of semantic.
Remember service bulletins and your M0 manual. It's always that other stuff. Go the extra mile. Read the extra stuff. That's where a lot of people make their mistake. They're just very surface, YouTube, surface. It's not really going into what is YouTube I should have put YouTube on our list of hierarchy. Where does YouTube fall in? Well, I guess there's YouTube, and then there's approved data, because YouTube's better because...
Oh, your channel is?
Yeah. No, it's not.
Go to YouTube. Where do I find approved manuals?
Yeah. All right, so that's the crank cases right there. The crankcase also has the oil passages. This isn't the oil section, but I kind of feel like you really should talk a little bit about the oil, thank you, passages. So in a Lycoming and Continental, I guess, the oil pumps are in the back. And the oil pump goes through the oil pump, and you should be looking at your engine before you put it together. You should have an oral on the oil passages and know all the oil passages. It's not real hard. You just have to spend some time in looking at it. Here's where the oil pump goes. Oil's going to come in this way because that's where the suction tube is. So it sucks it up from the oil sump. It comes up through here. It goes around the outside of the gears. You have to look at which way they rotate. And so through this stuff at the end. So they go this way. Oil goes around the outside. Pressures it through here. Has the ability to come out this way, which would be a hose going to the oil cooler. Also has the ability, let me see, goes there. There's another passage, comes up through here. Comes in, I'm not going to show you everything, goes through the oil screen. Goes from the inside out on a Lycoming. Through the oil screen, we'll talk more about that. There's a pressure relief that is over there on the case. Goes from there through here. Do some various passages out here. Also included in there, and I'll let you kind of figure it out, there should be on your engine a drilled hole on the case, sorry. So it comes through here, goes out into the case. From the case, it's going to come in, the accessory case, that right there. Right over here is the oil pressure relief ball. When the pressure exceeds a certain amount, it pushes that ball against that spring that you took apart. The spring moves back, allows oil to go through that hole in the bottom. It drops back down into the oil sump. You see the hole? Mm-hmm. Yeah, big hole right there. Otherwise, it's going to go into this oil gallery right here. There's a tube that goes all the way down. That's where you pulled out the plug. And the plug's over here. So it goes through that oil gallery, and that is pressurized. So consider that like a oil rail, oil pressure tube, whatever you want. And then from there, on this engine, that is vented, it's drilled into the tappet bores, not on your engine. And it goes into these holes here, pressure feeds the camshaft, and runs down through some tubes here and pressure feeds the bearings. The 290 is not that way. The 290 is very similar, except the tappets are not pressure fed. They're splash fed. There's literally this is not a 290, a trough. If you guys look, you will see that there's a trough right here. And the oil splashing off the crankshaft falls into the trough and drips down into the tappet bores. It is just drip oil. But on this one, it's not. So
would that one have like hydraulic tappets?
this one has hydraulic.
Okay.
So then oil under pressure is fed into the tappets. That oil under pressure is then fed into the hydraulic units, which we'll cover later. That oil is then pressure fed down the middle of the pushrod tubes. The actual gears are solid. Down the pushrod tubes where it pressure feeds the rocker arm and then drips onto the valves. So
So I noticed that on our push rod there is a hole, and there is a hole in our tappet as well. I was kind of wondering because I couldn't see a way for the oil to get into.
doesn't get in there.
Yeah, I was thinking
So-
about that. But so why is there a hole in the push rod then? Is it just the
I
same?
thought they were solid ends.
I think they're. You think they're? Do you remember?
Those holes?
Is there a hole?
There's a hole in.
The oil doesn't go through them though. It drips down the outside of them.
So then how does it get up to the cylinder head?
It follows them. It drips.
Oh, it drips on the outside of the push rod.
Mhm.
Oh no shit.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to do that. So our bearings here are pressure fed, and I think that kind of covers it. There is a transfer tube that transfers over there because that side of the case also has to be pressurized. So, well, let's talk about bearings. Got lots of different bearings on here. What's a bearing? We already said it once.
Something that facilitates movement.
Yep, any surface that supports another surface. Not the best definition, came out of the book. All right,
A sacrificial element.
sacrificial element, yeah, throw them away. So functions. How many times should we use those bearings that you're like crankshaft bearings and rod bearings? How often would we use those? Never. Never is the appropriate answer. Once they're out, just throw them away. All right. Let's see. Functions. I don't know. Things about bearings. I got notes here. Material must be strong enough. Must be strong enough to withstand pressure. The pressure that's going to be applied to it. You got a lot of pressure from that piston moving back around that connecting rod, around that crankshaft, spinning the crankshaft. So you got a lot of pressure. So you got to have, must be able to permit turning with minimal wear and friction. Minimal wear and friction. They have to be held to a close tolerance. What does that mean?
They gotta be tight.
Kind of.
There's not a lot of.
The way the machines are made to a exacting tolerance.
There you go. So if I ordered 6 bearings, or 8, right? We order 8 main bearings for our engine. All 8 should be about the same.
To the nearest 10th.
Can't have, well, this one's a 1,000 thicker than this one's, but the thick one here, they should all be about the same. So
You have
no
to
matter,
specify if it's oversized or undersized.
that's the part number. You'd order by part number. Provide freedom of movement. Some of this is redundant. And obviously withstand some pretty high loads. So it's got to do all of this and do it for a long time. Like I said, aircraft engines, piston engines are designed so that you can start them up. Once you put a bolt on an airplane, you could literally start it up and run it at full power for whatever the TBO is. 12 years or 2,000 hours, whichever comes first. If that's the thing, it should run wide open at that without any problems. All right, types of bearings. Start with the plain bearing. Plane is an airplane, but like the bagel. Yeah, that's pretty good. Like the bagel. Plain. All right, so plain bearings, which you are very familiar with because you have 16 plain bearings in your engine. Well, 16, 17, 18, 19, well, pieces anyway. It must be able to withstand radial and thrust loads. Now, if I'm going to add thrust loads in there, you do not have a removable thrust bearing that's built into the case, or it is just the case. Continental doesn't do that. Continental does put thrust bearings in their engines, removable. Let me see. What do we got here? Plain bearings, radial and thrust loads. What kind of things are running in plain bearings? Crankshaft, camshaft, connecting rods. All right. So we have all those things. Must have a constant supply of oil. Cam has built-in bearings, you know. So it has to have a constant supply of oil. I wrote sort of. The POH, or the operator's manual for my engine, said if you drop below 30 psi during cruise power, assume that engine failure is imminent.
On which engine?
The 0470. Larry had a catastrophic. There's a lot of problems with oil filter adapters blowing out and all the oil dumping, and that happened to Larry. I don't want to tell his story, not that long ago, and he can tell you exactly how long an engine can run without oil. So.
That was on his 172, right?
Yeah.
He said he didn't spin any bearings too.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Yep.
When you say oil filter adapter, you're talking about the oil filter, how it mounts to the engine?
Yes. The ones with Continentals came with they all came with screens, but Continental has an internal screen, and I don't have one in here. And you take the screen out, you can screw in an adapter that holds a spin-on filter, and so it's that mating surface between the adapter and where it screws the engine. Those gaskets have been known to fail. So, what kind of material? Yep. So we have silver. Silver was a big one. What was it? The GO 300s used silver, and when I built one a long time ago, I had a hard. Oh, and the not that, it's the Bonanza motors, the E Series Bonanza. They use silver, and man, I had a hard time finding bearings, and that was a long time ago. And when I finally did, the guy's like, "This is the last set, man."
Yeah, silver's hella soft, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just looks thick on
So
it.
it's not pure silver. I mean, it's not the whole thing's made out of silver. It'll have like a steel backing with a coating. So they're laminates, if you will. So, but these are some of the materials: silver, lead, and then obviously your alloys, which would be bronze. Bronze, good under pressure, but has high friction. So good pressure,
Well, what bearings are we talking about?
plain. Good under pressure, has high friction. Babbitt,
That's old, isn't it?
yeah.
Sounds old.
Babbitt, that's, what's Babbitt? Well, it's tin. I'm like, oh, okay, tin. Copper. I got you. Tin, copper, what else? Antimony. Well, I don't know what the hell that is.
Aluminum?
Well, that's what I pay my ex-wife.
There you
I don't have an ex-wife.
go. Oh, Babbitt bearings are the kind where you have
Yeah,
to
just your
form
first
your-
one.
Take that cross out of the T, and that's what
Babbitt bearings are the kind you have to form yourself, correct? You don't design them as such?
I'm not in aviation. You don't make them yourself, maybe. This is what aviation stuff is. silver.
I think you already mentioned silver.
Oops. I did, but oops, I didn't mention this. Babbitt. Babbitt is not good under pressure, but has low friction. And then silver has good pressure, good under pressure, good heat conductor, friction qualities. I like this. Not dependable. Not dependable. Oh, thank you for that one. And then our common alloys. Common alloys. So this is what you would actually get, I think. So steel backed. So you're going to start with a steel shell, which is what you're going to find, with silver, or silver bronze, silver bronze bearing, and a lead sprayed surface. So if you take most bearings, and I've noticed that seems to be exactly what they are. You have the metal backing, which seems to be like has a coating of some sort of, not silver, but it's a silver colored coating. And then you have the soft surface that whatever it is going to ride in. And if you take sandpaper or Scotch-Brite and you start wiping it away, you're going to wipe away a lead coating, and it's going to start looking copper. And then you go through the copper, and so it seems like it's steel, copper, and copper alloy, and then lead. That's what it always looks like to me. So we had that, or I have bronze backed. With lead or Babbitt surface. There are different types, yeah.
Is there any polyethylene or like high hardness textile or silicate bearings, or are they typically metallic?
I think they're typically this. One of the things you have to realize with aviation as opposed to automotive is you can, go to automotive and they can ask you these questions. Would you like this kind of bearing? Would you like that kind of bearing? Would you like this kind of bearing? In aviation is, would you like a new bearing or wouldn't you? This is the bearing that goes in it.
That's what it was certified with.
That is what it is certified at. That is what you would get. That is the end of the discussion. Now, you can take it just a little bit outside of that, and there are other manufacturers. Like, for example, when I was building the engines, I could buy OEM, original equipment manufacturer. So I'm working on Lycoming. I could call Lycoming, and I get their LW- whatever part number. Or I could call Superior Air Parts, which would do the same thing. They would change the first part of the part number to SL and have the same number. So Superior had a PMA, Parts Manufacturing Authorization, to make that bearing. Now, Superior could make their own but metallic bearing that's different from Lycoming. You won't know the difference. They're going to be the same color. They're completely interchangeable. But word on the street would be, oh, this bearing's a little better, and you wouldn't know why. You just get it. That was your two choices. That's enough of that. So there are different types of plain bearings. There's the tang. This is really how they're held in. Has a tang. You have a tang on yours. Everybody know that. Has a tang, but you don't have a dowel. Oops. Dowel. Tang and dowel to hold in place. And I think the reason why is you don't have enough horsepower in that engine, so Lycoming chose not to put a dowel. This one has dowels. These little things right in the middle. So the bearing's going to have a hole that's going to fit on those dowels. It doesn't have a dowel. It goes on that side. Dowels are on that side, which is going to be an important point here. Just a second. There's the high crush. Has a tang. Has a tang. Ooh, it made a heart. Wish I knew how to do that. Has a tang, but sticks up 0.003, 0.003 above the surface. Inches. Yeah, kilometers. Miles, yeah, it's like above surface, the parting flange, I should say parting flange, and just crushed into place. And is crushed into place. So I got those two types. Now is a good time to talk about something that's going to confuse you at a certain point.
Was everything else before not good?
You just gonna? Did you change your mind?
Before he's confused, he wants to ask the question.
Okay.
In regards to the crush bearing, wouldn't there be, is there any risk at all, like where it could crush like incorrectly and seize into the crankshaft at all?
No. So there's a tang right there, right? See the tang? There's the dowel. Here's the dowels right here. There are two types of front main bearings for Lycoming. You have the easier type. And it just looks like the center main and the rear main just have two front ones. And so you have four of the same, right? And they're all interchangeable. That is not the way most Lycomings look. Most Lycomings have a single piece front bearing that goes from here all the way to there. The problem with them is the split is not in the same plane as these. The split is 90 degrees off. So when you read the directions on how to put these bearings in, it's going to be very confusing. See, there's the bearing right there. And the split, you can't see it, is right along this line right there. The split is right there.
You stick it on the crank fryer.
So you have to put it on the crankshaft before you bring the crankcases together. And this is the case half. Oh my gosh. Oh man, I just saw that. Okay, but you have to then, so you put those bearing halves on the crankshaft first. And it talks about first putting them in the crankcase without a crankshaft. So you just take the two bearing halves, and I don't have a big one, I should, and you put the two halves here, and then you draw a pencil line on both sides. That's why there's pencil there. And then you draw little marks on the case so you know the up and down, because it has to line up with these dowels. By the way, this dowel is pushed in, which is, this is what's going to happen. I didn't realize that. So you put then when you assemble it, you put the bearings on the crankshaft, and you put the crankshaft in here, and you got to line it up so that these dowels poke into the holes that you can't see, and that everything lines up perfect. If you don't have it lined up perfect, what happens when you torque it together, you push this dowel inside of the case, like this one has been done. You push a big divot into the bearing, and the crankshaft doesn't really move too well.
It doesn't want to start.
So that's fine. You take it apart, and you
Get a new crankshaft.
buy new bearings. So you don't have this one. So when you're looking at the instructions for how to put it together, it talks about putting it in on the split and drawing a pencil line. You're like, this makes no sense to me. It won't, because you don't have this engine. But while we're on it, what the hell? Okay, first of all, is that double-aught silk thread?
Oh yeah.
That's a shoelace.
That's all of it. That's all of it. You don't have to
They
worry.
doubled it over here. God, that's terrible.
Where do you find these pictures?
On the interwebs. YouTube, man. Some guy doing a YouTube video how to put a Lycoming together, probably. At least these aren't on upside down. All right.
Hey, at least he left space next to the bearing tube.
I know. See? Yeah, he read the
Not all
thing.
bad.
If he crushes the dowels,
Yes.
do you have to replace the crankcase, or can you?
pop the back.
No, in fact, there's a service instruction about replacing dials. There's a certain type they want now, and I can't remember what it is. They had 3 different type. Now they just want one type. So you just pull them out. You just drill a hole and slide hammer them out and press new ones in. It's not a huge deal.
What material are bearings made out of?
What material or what?
Just talk about it.
Ours?
Yes.
Yeah.
On our bearings.
Oops. What material? I don't know for a fact. They don't really.
Get me for a second.
We just talked
One last 30 minutes.
He's over there like,
I've been listening, so
All right, since I have this here in my notes, I think this is something like we said. A bearing that is failing will give off metal. And will cause low oil pressure. Probably you'll get those 2 things. No guarantee. Where would I find this metal?
In the oil sump?
Well, I don't pull the sump off airplanes very often.
Filter.
In the oil filter or
And oil analysis.
an oil. They have to be pretty small. Has to get through the filter to get into the oil to go to analysis, but that's what you're looking for, and the oil filter.
I'm assuming it looks like glitter in the oil filter.
I've seen that. That is not a happy day. All right, so that's the plain bearing. Then we have what we would call anti-friction bearings. I know you're thinking, I thought they'd all be anti-friction. Anti-friction type. All right, just make sure we know we do not reuse bearings. All right, anti-friction type. Let's see. There we go. Oh, out of order. All right, so we have plain bearings. This is out of a Continental because this part right here, this goldish thing, is what bearing? That is my thrust bearing. All right, my anti-friction type. We have, it's easier to start with this one. Ball bearing. And if the balls make indents in here, it's called, yeah, something Brunelling. These are called, so that's ball, roller. So it's easy to start here because you can say, well, those roll, so they could be roller, but no, they're ball. Roller, and then tapered roller. Tapered roller. And notice this cutaway, the way this is cut away here. How the ball has got a deep groove right there. So if this is a thrust bearing, we would want the propeller on this side or that side.
Yeah, your side.
This side, you want it pulling that way on everything. Yeah. So you want to make sure you put them in right. So we have the roller, even though I said start with the ball. The roller, so there's the straight type. And that would be used for, do you know?
Oh, that's right.
Radial loads only. Radial. So in a radial engine that doesn't use plain bearings around the crankshaft, they use these type of bearings. You would have at least 3 sets of bearings. You'd have a thrust bearing and then 2 what we call radial load bearings. So those 2 bearings around the connecting rods would be, most likely,
Straight
rollers. And then thrust bearing is going to be taper. All right, straight, used only for radial loads. And then we have the tapered. So radial or thrust loads. Although I don't know of any engine that uses a tapered bearing like that. Where do I find my tapered bearings?
Wheels.
Wheels. Wheels is correct. Let's see. Both use.
So the radials don't have a tape. You say they do or don't?
Do not have tapered.
Oh, I thought you just.
Only wheels. both use an inner and outer race.
Sorry, I'm just confused on why you wrote that there then.
I don't know, just because it was like a thought. Both use, yes. This is what I hate when you. So these are pretty much, they're not one piece, but when you buy them, it comes together, right? You have one thing,
Until you take it off.
and until you break it.
Yeah.
Sealed bearing.
And all-
They're not sealed. They look like this. They just look like that. But when you buy this over here, the tapered, they come just like that in two pieces. In fact, you don't order it and open it up and go, oh, look, it came in two pieces in a box. These are two separate part numbers. And if you want the inner and the outer, then you better order two different things because they're both two different part numbers and they're separate. Follow me?
Yeah.
Okay, but here's what I hate. When you refer to these, it's the cup and the cone. And then I have to always think, what the hell's which one's which? Why couldn't you just call it inner and outer, please? Because that is, yeah, very non-ambiguous. But now it's the cup and the cone. So which one's a cup and which one's a cone? Well,
Holds the bearing.
the thing that holds the bearing must be the cup, and for the other thing is the cone. So,
And I'm assuming we'd be wrong about that?
huh? No, he's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like a trick question.
It's not. It's just you have to think it through. Cup and cone. I don't know. Because when you're holding this piece right here in your hand, it's kind of shaped like a. It's shaped like a cone. Yeah, but sure.
You have like more of an imagination. Like,
I know.
draw the line.
I don't have an imagination.
Do not.
I'm
Do not sound like-
non-imaginative. All right. We have the ball bearing. The ball. So we have the roller. Now we have the ball bearing. This is the least amount of friction. Why is that?
What's service area?
Because it's a little tiny contact point on the cup and the cone.
It is an infinitesimally small contact point with the ball. It's very, very tiny. Yes, amount of contact area. Of course, it's like that with the roller, but it's just longer. And the point behind that is because you have such an infinitesimally small amount of contact area, you have to realize force times area. So any force is on a very, very tiny little area, which we're going to talk about when we get into counterweights with rollers in them. It doesn't take much pressure to leave indents with these things. And once you get an indent, it's all over. So least amount of friction. Let me see what else. Least amount of friction.
That would mean they have the most amount of force on, right? Most
Yes.
amount of pressure?
Yep.
So they gotta be hard material?
Yes. Used for thrust or radial loads. The thrust type, ones that are strictly for thrust or designed more for thrust, uses a deep groove. Deep groove. So deep groove ball bearing would be for thrust. And where would we find these? Magnetos. Exactly. That's even on my notes. Generators, alternators, magnetos, radial engine. Where in the radial engine?
Front.
Thrust. Front main thrust. So, yeah. Okay. So we good with bearings?
Yeah.
All bearings need oil, though. These will run a little bit longer without oil. I wouldn't put it to the test.
You don't grease them?
Yeah.
I guess they're open.
In an engine, they're oil
Yeah.
bath. All right, crankshaft. What is the job of the crankshaft? Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't put the FA definition. So when you get the question from an oral examiner, what is a crankshaft? You would know to say it converts an item that converts.
Reciprocating motion into rotary motion.
There you go, reciprocating motion into rotary motion. converts reciprocating motion of piston there into rotating motion. Piston and con rods, I should say. Piston and con rods, that's what I wrote. Into rotary motion. They are forged out of, I know, extremely strong alloy. Steel alloy, steel alloy. And I believe it's 4340 if you care. If you don't, it's still 4340. I'm not going to write this, but it's interesting to me. When Lycoming makes their crankshafts, they heat them to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit for 24 hours. I believe it's the nitriding process. They didn't say, but I think that's what they're doing.
24 hours?
Yes, 24 hours. And then they're instantly pulled out and checked for runout. We know what runout is. It's bent. So any bent crankshafts are placed under a hydraulic ram and pressed within 2 minutes of removal from the oven. It's a big hydraulic ram, put the high spot up, force it into straightness, hold it. If it works, we're good.
Fast, check that
I know.
Probably not done by
Oh,
hand.
it's probably a machine then, yeah.
Yeah, let's say, how would you pull it out?
done
Oh, somebody's got to operate the machine.
Yeah, somebody's got to
Stolen hammer.
1,200
Yeah,
degree
yeah,
crankshaft.
It's still, it's still hot. It's still
Put these-
red.
put these oven mitts on,
shirt
hold
on
that
and
thing.
pouring water on it as you pour it.
It takes me 2 minutes just to set up the dial indicator.
What are we?
All right, they are nitride hardened. I believe Continental does the entire crankshaft, and I believe Lycoming does up to and just past the slinger ring, but not their flange. So their flanges bend, Continental's break. So nitride hardened. What is nitride hardening? That is nitrogen from this thing right here. anhydrous, anhydrous, ammonia gas, is forced to penetrate the surface at exposing the part for about 40 hours at 975 degrees Fahrenheit, which sounds like what Lycoming is doing, right? They're just 24 hours at a little bit higher temperature.
Is that 975?
Yeah, anything let's see, not to be nitrided is copper coated. Camshafts. So you'll get a camshaft and it has copper right here, right here, right here, right here. All these that's copper was on there. So that means that everything shiny was nitrided. Right? You can see the copper right here on this one. Gears. You will often see gears.
The teeth will be nitride.
The teeth are not nitrided, but the tip of every one has got copper on it. It's got copper around here, so the teeth are nitrided. So parts of the gear are nitrided. And you can see the copper where it's not. So when I used to send crankshafts out to be ground, which was a common thing in the engine shop because we didn't do our own grinding, we'd send them out. And it wasn't that, occasionally you get a call from the crankshaft shop going, hey man, sorry, we lost your crankshaft in nitriding. And at that point I really didn't understand, well, you mean lost it. Just go in and look. It's got to be there somewhere. It's not that long. So, but what happens is they put it in there for this length of time, and it either warped or cracked. So,
That's
all right.
Liability, like you just take, like, hey.
Yeah, and then sorry, got to call the customer and say your crankshaft didn't survive.
Joey. Don't tell the crackheads that